Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of CloudBites Conversations. For this episode, I have someone who is, someone who's really, well known within the ecosystem and very influential within the ecosystem. Someone who's got a lot of experience in a variety of different roles, and that many of you will have both seen at events, but also perhaps not been aware of to how much this person does behind the scenes at events as well, I think. In kind of organizing them and bringing them all together. And so, excuse me, I'm very pleased to have on the podcast with me today, Christie Fidura.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to have you here. It's for those listening to all the episodes, it's going to feel like we've had two superstars in 2 episodes. Because Andy Fawcett was the last one. We've got you now. I mean, it's Mark Benioff next or bust. That's it.
Well, a hard act to follow after Fawcett. He's a wonderful person, a great community-focused person, and I'm so happy to be able to work with him a few times a year.
I know, he is a very great guy, and as we were discussing on the episode, my first Salesforce-based boss. So
Yes, I couldn't believe that when you told me that. That's amazing.
Yes, which poorly ages both me and Andy, which is probably not great for either. So, so you and I have known each other for, as we were just talking about off air, more than 7 years. In fact, closer to 9 now. I'm sure that most of the people listening will be quite familiar with you or your work. But just for those who aren't, can you give us a little bit of background about who you are, what your role is within Salesforce, and kind of how you got into the Salesforce space as well? Because you've had a few interesting and different jobs along the way, and you didn't directly come in from community. Well, you made your way through community management into Salesforce, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've had a few career changes in my life, and that's one of the things that I really like. I'm a very people-focused person, so I like jobs and roles that enable me to be with people, and not just a set number of a smaller number of colleagues, but also really externally. And I also get bored quite easily. So it's really great for me when I can find yet something else to add to my plate that makes good sense. I'm trying to calm down about that. Being in my later years now, I'm trying to be more sensible about the things I take on. But well, I'm just a small town girl from Richmond, Virginia, and I love technology. Mm-hmm. Like if you had me in a nutshell, that's pretty much what it is. Turns out my parents were both technologists. My dad, he was quite a physical person of things. He was a pipe fitter for a large manufacturing plant called DuPont, one of their plants in Virginia. And my dad was basically the guy who fixed the stuff that broke down, right? So he was a jack of all trades. He got to talk to different people all the time, exactly what I just said I like to do, and go all over the plant. My mom was a typesetter. So she was like, we're talking about the 70s and 80s, big mainframe machines. She was creating type and actually laying it out for newspapers, for small print houses, things like that. So, and she was a technology adopter. So when I went to university, not knowing what I wanted to do, I actually took a class in technical writing. And I didn't, there wasn't really a lot of opportunity to have a role as a technical writer in Virginia that I knew of, but I thought that it sounded really great because I love English and I love reading, as you can see in my background.
Yes,
I have quite
a nice expensive bookshelf.
I really like reading and literature and communication. So I thought this class would be really interesting, and it was. And so what ended up happening is that my dad came home from work one day and he said, DuPont is hiring 12 summer students. Now they're only going to hire engineering kids, but I think you should apply. And I was like, well, you just said, why would I apply? I'm a literature person. And he said, well, you just never know. So I applied and I actually got hired by DuPont, unbelievably, to work there for a summer, to learn a computer system that was brand new, and to write a training manual on it, and then to teach it to very experienced and very mature technical engineers. Right?
Mm.
These were guys who didn't like, this is before computer mice.
Yeah, it's
This is really old school. So I thought, once I was doing that job and I was having these incredible conversations with these really experienced engineers who didn't know anything about a computer necessarily, but they were so intelligent, and
mm.
like I would have these incredible conversations with them, and I thought, so interesting to just be able to sit down and learn about what somebody else does and to appreciate really what they do. And so I was lucky enough after graduation, even though that was in 1992 and we had a recession on then, I was lucky enough in 93 to actually get a job as a technical writer working for a less than truckload transportation company, which would take goods from person one to person two, kind of like a DPD sort of thing, except B2B, not B2C. And this company was really forward thinking. They were the first companies to ever create a handheld device for their drivers. So that when the driver didn't have to go and do drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the rest of his day before he found out that he also had a job over on the next block, right? So that was a really exciting time to be with that particular company, because I got to learn all kinds of systems. They had just implemented PeopleSoft, so I was the official technical writer on their PeopleSoft implementation. I learned how to do online help development. Then HTML came in. I'm just a technology girl. I just really like all that stuff. So I really enjoyed learning and sitting with the developers as they were developing the systems, right? And that is still my favorite part of my job. I love going to conferences like London's Calling, where you can sit in a session and listen to a developer talk about the challenges that they had, the solution that they selected, and how the implementation went and what the results were, right? Like I love that kind of stuff. So skip and hop a little bit future forward. I ended up being transferred due to a very large purchase of a software company from Richmond, Virginia to the Silicon Valley. So I moved to San Francisco in 1998. And my husband joined me, and 6 months later, he had the opportunity to go to London for 6 months and asked me if I wanted to go. And I said no, because we had just gotten to California and I really wanted to have a few years in the Bay Area. And the very next day, I went to work, and the marketing team joined our integration meeting and were complaining that nobody in Europe knew the software. And I was like, I know the software really well because I wrote all the documentation for it, so I could go. So Skip and I came over to London in October 1999 for a 6-month stint, and we never left.
6 months and you're still here.
6 months and 24 years ago.
Can't tear yourself away. So, so tell us about joining Salesforce then. How did you? I mean, I would say, how did you find out about Salesforce? What's funny is from the technology side, when we talk to a lot of developers and admins and have that kind of chat, it's always like, oh well, I was working at a company and someone in sales said, oh, there's this thing called Salesforce, and I kind of started using it, and now I've been having a career for 15 years or whatever it would be. What was it like from sort of, I suppose, the the non-implementation side, kind of coming across it? And how did you get into Salesforce that way?
So back in 1999, when I was working for this little software company in Richmond, Virginia, we had developed a Salesforce automation tool called Pipestream Technologies. And that was in the CRM space, or what became the CRM space. So I've actually been in CRM since 1998, 99, which is unbelievable to me to think about, because the CRM industry had a boom. Like, trade fairs, the CRM shows, even in Virginia, were thousands and thousands of people in airplane hangars full of vendors and solutions and things like that. It was an incredible time. And then unfortunately, my company, which was now a big company called Remedy,
Hmm.
Remedy Systems, which it was then sort of swallowed up by another company called BMC. BMC is still around. And in fact, Remedy's action request system is still around because it's
Yeah.
basically an event bus platform, right? Like you can do anything on it, just like the Salesforce platform. So I left the CRM industry in the aughts because I couldn't find a job here in London with a CRM company.
Hmm.
And CRM always made great sense to me because I love the fact that it spoke to so many different types of people, right? You could have business users,
Hmm.
finance people, you could have end users, you could have, salespeople, you could have admins and developers all building like in the same system. It was like a common sandbox, right?
Hmm.
Like all the kids came to play in the sandbox, and I love that. But I had to leave the CRM industry, and so I then went into various other things, basically finding jobs that didn't really fit me, but because I'm fairly good at being a jack of all trades, I could kind of fit myself into. So
Yeah.
I did some product management work. I did product marketing work. I did, I even did pre-sales for a while. I don't really like sales because I like to really talk to people about the technology.
Hmm.
I don't want to sell it to them. I want to hear what they're doing with it. Um, so I've always loved CRM. Like
Yeah.
I always have. And I remember hearing about Salesforce. I remember seeing them at those big trade fairs that I went to. And then over the years, I was like, gosh, Salesforce is kind of, becoming the behemoth product now. And it's because of the platform, right? I mean, that platform is just phenomenal. That deep unification enables everybody to do everything. And I've worked. If I go back to my DuPont days, right? I remember there were people in rooms who only worked on one system, and nobody knew what that system was, and there was data in there that nobody could have,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So I love that Salesforce just sort of connects everything, and then you've got these super clever administrators who make sure that you only see and touch and edit what you are supposed to see, touch, and edit. I love that developers can connect things onto it, can build things out of it, can scale you up, can scale you down. It's so powerful. So I've been with Salesforce now for 9 years, and I was hired actually to be an EMEA, almost like a field marketing person
Mm.
for Trailhead. So I was going to all the big shows here, and several of you who are from the CRM or the Salesforce industry might remember, we had quick starts area at various world tours. We had, sort of hands-on areas where Trailhead was just sort of taking hold and really getting a foothold. And I would run those areas. And that was a real trial by fire.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about Trailhead, and I learned a lot about running an event at Salesforce. And Salesforce runs a lot of events. So having that as a skill is actually a very important component of my day-to-day makeup now.
Yes. Yeah. Because one of the big fan of obviously Salesforce. I don't think that's a shocking revelation for anyone listening to this, that anyone that knows me. Funnily enough, BMC have an ITSM solution out currently that is still that is actually 100% on Salesforce. I come across it every so often. It's called
Amazing.
Remedy Force. So there you go. It's yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's very, very there's a few people I know that still use it because it is an ITSM one. One of
Mhm.
the one of the things you mentioned there about like how easy it is and how unified it is. I had a conversation the other day with someone on LinkedIn where they were saying about basically, there was something about replacing Salesforce because it was, it's rubbish legacy stuff. And I was like, look, I still do, predominantly Salesforce stuff. I think most people know that I work with other systems and other solutions and other platforms. Um, and I will be very honest. Sometimes I recommend other solutions and platforms
Sure.
because it's the right fit for people. Um, but it was really interesting, kind of having this conversation with this person. They're like, well, why would you wouldn't recommend Salesforce now, would you? You'd recommend something else. I was like, no, I recommend Salesforce all the time because of. And I gave them an example of a company I recommended it for recently, and I was like, because they wanted sales and service and these things all connected in one. I said it does that out of the box. They're like, yeah, but out of the box though, it doesn't really. I was like, no, it really does it. Like that part, I mean, trust me, I've got a list of whinges I can have about what I need to set up. And if
Of
you want to
course.
take them away afterwards, Christy, and file them internally and send them up to Parker, I will give them to you. But
No problem.
yeah,
He and I are like that.
yeah. One day I'm going to find a route up to someone just to sit down and be like, can we just talk about fixing these three things and I'll shut up. But like, there's nothing's perfect. But I was saying to this
Yeah.
guy, like, it's one of those things that if you want to get a basic sales process and a basic service process set up using the same contact and account data, using the same contact and account data isn't the difficult part of that in Salesforce. And I think there's still a lot of people that don't realize that, and I think also a lot of people are kind of too blown away by it having to be new. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, it's
Mhm.
one of the problems I think that Salesforce has right now, in sometimes, is that because it's no longer the 10-year-old startup, it's now the
Yeah.
25-year-old nearly incumbent. That
Yeah.
it's a much different pitch. Although what's interesting is if you talk to VCs or private equity investors or all that, they will all demand Salesforce. It's really, really quite interesting. No one sat there going like, yeah, can you build your entire stack on Monday.com, please? And then, okay.
Well, I mean, I think there's a solution for as many customers are out there in the world. There's a solution that's right for them, and I by no means think that everybody should be on one platform. How
Yeah.
boring the world would be.
Yeah.
But I think that for what Salesforce offers as far as that unification, it's pretty powerful, and it's very difficult to discount the power, right,
Yeah.
and the flexibility and the scalability of the platform. And it's written, again, going back to my true love of the developer skills. It's just written so elegantly, right? And even back in 1999, when they were writing code with like bamboo pencils, because I'm so old now. But that is it's so great to see that code base. And of course, we invest in the platform, which I love as well. So we never sit back on our laurels. That's not what Salesforce does. Your top three fixes and everybody else's top three fixes notwithstanding.
Yeah.
This is a very agile company, and that's why we've stayed relevant all these years. And if I could like, I'm such a Benioff fan. I really am a huge fan of his. He's an old school sales guy. That's what he is. He, in his biography, which is on my shelf back there, Business Behind the Clouds, he writes about how he used to go with his grandfather on Saturday afternoons. His grandfather was a textile supplier to factories, and he would go from one factory to another with a boot full of textiles and sell it, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, Mrs. Jenkins, you said you wanted a tweed that had blah blah blah. I went and got this for you. What do you think? And Mrs. Jenkins, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you. And by the way, Mrs. Jenkins, how was your dog? Because I know you said he wasn't feeling very well. Like, that's old school sales, right?
Yeah.
That is what that is. And he is a master at it. He's a master at also being able to see what's coming. And thank goodness for that, because he makes the company relevant all the time. And that's how we've stayed relevant. And I love being in a company that is not just on the curve, but way ahead of the curve.
I think one of the things that I think I mentioned this to Ben McCarthy a while ago in a podcast I did for him on Salesforce Ben podcast about. There's a lot of stuff I think as well that people don't see that goes on. I mean, my list of three annoyances are three annoyances that are like only for me and no one else should ever care about. But things like Hyperforce and the switch for the Salesforce database switch and things like that. There's so many things that have been done that have just happened under the hood that if years ago if you'd have said, oh yeah, everyone's database is going to switch over and no one's going to notice it, I'd have laughed at you. Like, it's one of those things that you just don't think about. But there are so many things like that. Again, I don't think people truly appreciate or realize that goes on in the background. So you joined Salesforce, as you say, as to be kind of like an EMEA field marketing person for Trailhead. I'll have to go look up what Trailhead is. I've not come across it but is you've had a number of different roles as well, kind of culminating your current role. So tell us a little about the different types of roles you've had and kind of how those roles have changed over time as well. Because one of the, I think, things that's quite interesting you and I have spoken about before is that when you probably started the role, it was still quick starts and handouts and workbooks and things like
Mhm.
that. And now nobody prints paper anymore to kind
That's right.
of give a physical workbook. So so how has that changed, evolved as you kind of changed roles as well?
Well, the first couple of years, it was just a massive heavy lift of running from show to show in EMEA and having these quick start areas, tons of computers and everybody, all of them had to be set a particular way and, tons of staffers. And, I'll never forget the very first time I was going to be responsible for the quick starts area at my first TDX. And
Mhm.
I got on the phone with this lady, Holly Palmer from the strategic events team, and she's like, "Now, Christy, you're going to run this area." I was like, "Holly, I don't know how to do that." she said, "Yeah, you do. You're going to figure it out." And I thought, well, she thinks I can do it, and I
Yeah.
guess she can be there if I'm on the phone going, "What the heck?" And so I've always just kind of had this confidence that it's okay if I don't know, I can figure it out, or I
Yeah.
can ask somebody. And I love, I'm very grateful to be able to rely on a company full of very nice people who will help you at any time. So that is huge. But after this couple of years of being an EMEA field marketing person, for lack of a better way to put it,
Yeah.
and the heavy lift of all these computers place to place and conferences and things like that, the community conferences kind of really showed up strong here. So I kind of morphed into trying to do things at community conferences and, making sure that we had some kind of presence there, because I just sort of felt like they were happening, but we weren't really a part of them.
Mhm.
And that was it didn't really ever work out successfully because I didn't want to take over their event.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be relevant to the event, so I couldn't ever figure out a sweet spot for that. And it's actually gotten much better now that, the community team have, sometimes you'll see a little community booth, right? Which makes great
Yeah.
sense to have a community space at a community event to say, look, if you have a problem, approach the community table or come to the community
Exactly.
table. We'll tell you how this works. So I did that for a few years, and then I kind of got involved with global developer marketing based out of
Mhm.
California because they were running the developer survey. So this was a developer survey that they did every year. And at the time when I took it over, I was gifted this. Um, they had been paying people to take the survey, and I was like, I'm not paying anybody to take a survey. I talk to developers all the time. They give me their opinion for free, right? Like I don't feel like it's a valid. It's not as people should want to tell you their opinion without the gift, right? And I know because I talk to them because they all give me their opinion. So
There's a lot of us that you probably don't want to give you our opinions anymore. Wish we'd just shut up and leave you alone.
always happy to have an opinion. So when I took on that role, it got much, much bigger because not only was I learned a lot about building a survey, because what is the answer? What is the question you want to get the answer to?
Mm.
How do you phrase that question? Where does it fall within the survey? La, la, la. And then, there was the structure of it, the design of it. And then there's the who needs to be involved in it, who wants to see the data at the end. There's the marketing and the promotion of the thing. So, I learned a lot. Like suddenly I'm doing paid social and suddenly I'm on, all these different platforms promoting the survey. And it was incredible. Like I had so much learning. And then kaboom, there's this little thing called the pandemic.
Yes, that
So
small thing that happened to lock us all up for 2 years.
yeah, so my job effectively stopped at that point because I was no longer an EMEA field marketing manager because I couldn't go anywhere and there was no place to go
Yeah.
anywhere. Anyway, so I was quite lucky that my VP said, look, why don't you just become a corporate person? You can be in the developer marketing function, which
Mhm.
you're kind of in now, but this would really align you to it. And you're already owning a survey, and we are really interested in doing better work with that.
Mhm.
So he saved my job, basically. and God love him. So I've done the survey, and then I went on to run a YouTube campaign for which I won an award externally to try and tidy up our YouTube presence of all the great content that our developer evangelists were doing. It was not structured, it was not in a good place, and the team in California put it into a really good place, and then I drove people to it, right? And that was
Yeah.
amazing, because suddenly it was like we were giving a present to the community of all of this great content, but we're making it findable for you, we're making it more usable for you. We're not making it hard anymore, we're loosening the restrictions maybe of findability and transparency. And that, for me, that word transparency is what I live for, right? I love that word. I love being able to bring developers closer together with the technology makers, right? That's what they really enjoy, and that's what I really enjoy. And so my role is kind of morphed on from the developer survey to taking over the developer tracks at various global events like TDX and Dreamforce, and now also TDX London. And I'm always partnered with one of our developer advocates, which I love, because they can be my platform experts, they can be my technology experts, and I am the person who looks after the developer presenter, the speaker, and make sure that they have what they need. And I'm kind of like Tristan Lombard. I don't know if you know him on social media. He calls himself a stage mom. I'm kind of like a stage mom. I'm helping developers be as fantastic as possible in front of a crowd. And I love that. I love that so much, because I get a sneak peek into all the technology that they're talking about. So I get my technology fix, and I also get to work with people, so I get my community fix. And I love doing that kind of role now. For a while, I was doing some things that were kind of all over the place, but I've really kind of settled into the sweet spot of being a content and community person. So my job title's changed a little bit over the past few years, and I keep trying to keep it updated on LinkedIn to really reflect what it is that I'm doing. Like, how do you put on there? I guess maybe I should just put stage mom as well, Tristan. I don't know. Maybe you can feedback on that. But it's really important to me that I stay relevant with the company, that I stay engaged and helpful with the company, that I'm contributing, viscerally to the company's success. And it's so satisfying to me that I can see my work, and I don't need like a spotlight. That's not what it's about. It's about the spotlight from my people, really. So
one of the things I've asked a few people about on the different episodes, and I'd love to get your opinion on, is around this kind of idea on content and the types of content that are needed nowadays, and where it should be going. Because one of the interesting conundrums, there was a big discussion on online a couple of years ago. I'd say a big discussion. There was a few of us insular Salesforce nerds that were all talking about it, but about like deep technical content for Salesforce, and one of the one of the interesting things I found when I was writing my books on Apex is kind of where to pitch them and who to pitch them at, and it's is that if you say something's for an expert, it's like, well, who decides what an expert is, and all of these things. One of the things that I think is really interesting is how the landscape of those coming into and being in the Salesforce ecosystem is changing. And what I mean by that is that when I remember when I got like about 5 years experience in the ecosystem, and to be able to turn around at that point and say I have 5 years experience in the ecosystem was like, wow, that's quite a long time. And then when it was 10 years, it was like, oh, wow, that's quite a long time. But there was a lot more people with 5 years. And now, as a prime example, my wife is a Salesforce solution architect. She has been working with the platform now for over a decade. She's really, really good at her job, because she started doing it 5 years after I did. In my mind, like I talking to her the other week, I was like, well, and it's something to her. I was like, you've been doing this a long time, haven't you? She's like, yeah. Like, and I wasn't doing it in a sort of condescending or cruel way. More just that thing, about time dilation as you get older anyway and stuff like that. But but there's a lot more people. What I'm trying to get at is that there's a lot of people now who have 10 years experience. There's a lot of people now who have 5 years experience.
Yeah.
And so how do you balance off creating content that's going to fit, or for all these different groups, so that you're hitting the people that have done 10 years, 5 years, but also as there's a really new cohort of people coming in who are the new starters, who have very different expectations around content as well. So when I started, all I wanted in the world was a workbook, and
Right.
I think there were a couple of videos. It was the original Dev 401 recordings with is it Chris? Oh, what was his name? Yeah, like they basically some really old recordings that were out there, and I was fine with that because I'm of the generation that likes to have a video and actually a book to read. So I like the release notes and
Yeah,
things like that.
sure.
But obviously, the generation that's coming in out of university now, which would be Gen kind of Z coming in, I think that's right. They're me not knowing my generational cohorts, I'm really angry at myself. If I'm going to get a comment underneath this, I'm like, okay, boomer, shut up. But that new generation coming in have very different expectations around the type of content, the length of
Sure.
content, and what they want. So how do you, in your role, kind of match that all together so that you've not got a bunch of grumpy old people like me going, all Salesforce are producing is 30-second TikTok on how to do Apex, and equally that you're meeting the needs of these people coming in who aren't necessarily going to want to sit down and read a 200-page manual.
Yeah, great question. The first thing that I always say as a community management person, the very first thing is, why am I telling people where they should be going for their content? Why don't I just ask them where they're going?
Yeah.
Right. So if our people are saying that they're all going to this place now, then it's really important that we're in that place too. A great way for us to find that information out is with the developer survey, right? And it's actually just closed about 2 weeks ago, so you should be seeing some information come out about that soon. I like that we tell people what they told us about who they are, and I use that information, right? So that developer survey, the very first one that I did, is how I found out that our developer community would really like to, or we're already on YouTube, but we just weren't really there. We used our YouTube channel as kind of a dumping ground. We just parked stuff there, right? We didn't make it easy for people to find. And I had the survey data in my hands, and I said, look here, they're all on YouTube, and we're not really there. Let's do something about that. So we were able to make a great place for them in the place where they already were, without having to, guess where they were going to be. So that's really important, finding out where your people are and going there and being amongst them, right? And enabling, empowering them. And I think that's always been the driving focus and messaging behind Trailhead, is enablement and empowerment, right? And I keep those at my forefront. But when it comes to our developer tracks at TDX and at Dreamforce and at other events, it's about inspiration as well. Because I think that, I have sat in rooms with developers since I was, 22 years old, right? I know what they think for the most part. I know how they think. I know what motivates them. I know what doesn't motivate them. And I find myself having to explain it sometimes to a marketing person. Like, marketing people are always like, what's a developer marketing person? And I'm like, it's a marketing person with the word developer, right? Like, with the focus of a developer. It's always astounding to me that marketing people don't know who developers are. I was like, who do you think built the technology that you're working on right now? So I keep that inspiration as my guiding light. Now, we know from our developer surveys how much experience our people have, right? And that's a really useful piece of information, because it tells us how big our cohorts are of experience levels. And, you could be in the Salesforce ecosystem for 10 years, but maybe you've really only been focusing on one thing for 10 years. Maybe you haven't had the opportunity to build out your skill set. That's what's great about Trailhead, right? So I think Trailhead does a good job with letting people dabble. And I think developers in much of their makeup like to dabble. They like to try things out themselves. and they like to see other developers try it. Right. So I love, for example, our Code Live segments that we do on a monthly, on a twice monthly basis. That's such a great way for developers because they learn from each other. They're slightly competitive, right, as in nature. So they like to, well, I'm going to watch that guy do it, and then I'm going to do it better, right? And I love that kind of characteristic. I make sure for our big developer tracks that I am looking for content that is easily consumable, no matter what age or experience level or persona level you identify with, for everybody. So I want, for example, an admin to be welcome to sit in a session for a developer, no matter what level that admin is in, because how is that admin going to continue their growth, right? Maybe their personal growth or professional growth is leading them towards a completely different path, and if they don't get inspired by it, how can they know that it exists? So I try and make sure that there's a good scattering or smorgasbord of sessions for everybody. That's on the track side. But we know that there's a lot of people coming in from different areas. So JavaScript developers are very welcome in our ecosystem, right? They're very welcome to get hands-on with the platform. It's a good fit for them naturally. So we have spun up specific quests. There's content now just for JavaScript developers. There's a brand new quest that just came out this week called Get Started as a Developer, right? With Salesforce. And I think those empowerment things are great because also, like I said, if you have been with the platform for 10 years, but maybe you've missed out on, building Lightning Web Components, here's a great place for you to go back and pick that up. So I think it's really important that we're enabling and empowering people, but I think it's also equally important that we are inspiring them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's I'm looking forward to seeing the developer survey results. I look forward to seeing the developer survey results every year. But is using them as that guide, as you say, is a really good way of doing it. And I think one of the interesting things that there is about Salesforce now is that broadness. And it's one of those things that trying to cover. There's no way that you can be an expert in everything on Salesforce. No way at all. Like there are clouds and things that I have never logged into and never want to. And that's the way you've got to be with it. So let's just take another kind of sidestep back. And one of the things that I know that Salesforce in general has been very proactive about over the years is inclusivity of kind of people particularly in the developer space, because I'll be very honest and say not when I first started coding, because that was many years ago, but my first sort of job coding or programming outside of university, my first developer job, I would go to developer meetings and go to developer events, and it was .NET focused at the time, and it was all middle-aged, middle-class white men.
Sure.
And this was not. I'm not that old enough to be able to say that it was 50 years ago, but it was a good sort of coming up to 20 years ago now that I'm on about this. And there was a lot of people that I would go in there and they would look like me, except with varying levels of beards and hair on top, pretty much. And one of the things I think that Salesforce did really well, particularly in kind of the earlier days, is help show that there are a lot of different people that look like developers. Developers are not just middle-aged straight white men, basically, which is very true, and did a lot of good work promoting that within the community to kind of help show those faces and to help ensure that everyone felt welcome. I think was kind of the bigger thing, because it's all even if there are people in that space of different types, it's making them feel welcome and feel that the spaces are safe, which I think is a very big challenge often. So how have you, and what I'd be interested to know is how have you found that as a woman in kind of in the developer-centric kind of technology space yourself, and kind of how have you seen that change over the years? Because it's one of those things that I don't think, personally, I don't think now I see the same push for some of those programs for a variety of different reasons. But I wonder if one of the big reasons is, and I want to be very clear here, I am not saying that sexism has been solved. But I
Okay.
am very, very, very clearly that this is not the take home. But I'm just wondering, is some of the visibility lower because there are more safe spaces? You know what I mean? There isn't the need for clearly defining them anymore, or am I just misinterpreting some information?
It's quite a big question. I'm not sure if I have a direct answer, but I'll kind of meander through it. So I think that the Salesforce ecosystem is one of the most diverse I've ever seen, having been an IT girl for yonks and yonks now. I remember when I was working for Adobe, and the gaming division asked me to help them spin up some events and get in front of some people because Adobe had come out with HTML5 gaming. And I went to various different HTML groups and asked if we could have a speaker come into their group and give them a presentation. And I would go to those events, and I was the only woman there in a room of 200 people. It didn't bother me because I wasn't a member of the audience.
Yeah.
But I wasn't the event girl either, right? I was somewhere in between those two. And so I wasn't supposed to sit with the audience and be a member of the audience. And I wasn't supposed to be standing on stage and giving the information because I didn't have it. I was somewhere in between. And so I could very easily carve myself out and not really feel like I was not in the right place. But that's where they've always been. I mean, my God, I was in San Francisco, for goodness sakes, guys with skateboards and goatees and Converse were all I ever saw. We were in the building right next to Google. This was in 1998, right? Yeah. Google. Those people went into that building on a Monday and they didn't come out until Friday, right? I saw it happen with my own eyes. And every single person that I saw going in there was that stereotype, right? I never saw anybody else. And so I began, kind of thinking, well, I'm in a unique space because I'm in the technical writing division, right? And a lot of communicators or writers are women. So I was at home with those folks, and I didn't mind sitting in a room with 5 engineers because they were instructing me, they were giving me information. Again, I had power in that space. And I've always sort of, I think because that was my early connection, I've never gone into a room and been intimidated by the layout of the room.
That makes sense.
I just don't. But I know that many other people aren't like me, right? I have a lot of confidence and a lot of self-esteem, rightly or wrongly. And I think that Salesforce, once I entered the company and really started going to community events, I just remember thinking how diverse they were. And we are so lucky because we have so many different types of people all working on the Salesforce platform, which goes right back to the beginning of our chat when I said you could have a business user, you could have a finance person, you could have, a reports person. You have all these different kinds of people, and they're all different kinds of people, right? And they just all happen to work on the same platform. And I love the fact that it is so open and easy to kind of get started, like the Supermoms organization, right? Like that's an empowerment organization that helps people enter that ecosystem with confidence, with love and support and nurturing. I love that we have that, right? Like I didn't see that, from the .NET community. I didn't see that from the Java community. You just had to kind of, attend a meeting and be the only person of your ilk in that space. I think Trailhead has been a great leveler because you can skill up on your own and build your confidence all by yourself, right? And then, because I think traditionally, technology has been spread by people going to meetups, right? Like I'm interested in Microsoft, I'm going to go to a Microsoft meetup, right? Or a meetup about Microsoft, and I'm going to sit in that room and learn. And a lot of people, people who are primary caregivers or people who were in high school at the time, they couldn't go to those meetups.
Yeah.
Right. So they were very specific and created their own sort of bubbles and atmospheres. Whereas I think things have progressed, and I think Trailhead gives people that little bit of personal, oh, okay, I'm this type of person. I don't have this type of background, but I'm a ranger on Trailhead in this area. Like, my skill set is this. I feel okay to go to that meetup. Now, that's still not really 100% true of a lot of people. A lot of people are still really intimidated to go to a group event. But I think that the community does a wonderful job of welcoming other people. And, Salesforce can help and support the community groups, but ultimately it's the culture that the groups create. Like, I'm always in awe by, look at Louise Lockey's Women in Tech group. Sell
Yeah.
out every month. She's booked up 8 months in advance with topics. People are banging on her door, asking to speak at her events, giving her venues, right? And that's because she's created a fantastic culture of empowerment, inspiration, enablement. And I think that's the difference now, whereas maybe before it wasn't really had as much of a foothold.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And as I say, I don't want anyone to take away from this that I was
Of
saying
course not.
things have
Yeah.
solved or sorted. And we had Louise on talking about her Women in Tech group, amongst many other things, a few episodes back. And yeah, I think that I suppose I'm trying to get at, which I think you've answered wonderfully, is I think that you're right, that there is a lot more. I think there are a lot more well-established safe spaces now, or spaces that have, even if they're not. I'm trying to avoid using the term safe spaces. I don't want it to be deemed the wrong way, but events and groups you can go to where you have the right culture and the right personality and feeling in there that people don't feel worried about going to. Like you say, the Women in Tech group, and truth be told, the London Developer group, the London Admin group,
Yeah, absolutely.
the North of UK groups, they're all the Manchester user group, the Leeds user group, the Liverpool one. They're all very welcoming groups
Yeah.
because they've been built like that from the start. Because people just want to get to know each other and make friends and share and learn. But I do really agree with you. I think that Salesforce as an ecosystem has done a particularly good job in that, in the way it's promoted things. But yeah, I hadn't thought about the Trailhead aspect before. That's a really interesting, because typically when I think about especially how I got started learning to program, it's because I was a bored teenager and had free time to sit there tapping away at a computer. But if, as you say, you're a primary caregiver, or you have you have an existing job, you have all these other things, you're not going to be able to sit down and spend time just playing around with things. You need a nice guided path that is at your own time, and you're not going to be able to go away for a 5-day course or whatever.
Right, right. And that's how it used to be. It used to be that you didn't really have a chance to choose the technology. You were a cog in a wheel. Technology was delivered to your desk and you were told you had to fill in the blank here with that technology. And that meant you had to go to a course. That meant you had to get approval. You had to find a course. You had to get your company to pay for it. You had to travel to it. You were gone from home. And that's how you learned. And you were a cohort within that particular box of a room. And that's how actually the Salesforce community kind of got created, because if you go back and listen to Erica Kuhl's podcast that she did several years ago, she talks about how that's how she ended up creating the community. Because when she was in one of those training rooms as a Salesforce employee, I think she was delivering the course, I can't quite remember, and the people after the course were like, oh, well, can I get your email address? They were exchanging contact details. They wanted to stay in touch with one another. And she thought there must be a way for us to help facilitate their connection to one another, right? And that's actually the birth of the Salesforce community, which is a huge, successful thing now. And that was due to her just saying, what can we do to help facilitate? But we also know, Paul, that, from the developer survey, where our people don't like to go, right? And we know that if people have less experience, they are, relatively new in their experience levels of Salesforce, 1 to 2 years, they don't feel comfortable going to public spaces like Discord or, Stack Exchange or what have you, and posting a newbie question, because they get a lot of guff for it, you know. And so that's why one of the reasons that I took on the ownership of the Salesforce developers group in the Trailblazer community, which has grown in like a 4-year time frame from 3,000 people to 27,000 people, right? Because it's a safe place. Nobody shouts at anybody there. Obviously, there's the odd outliers, but in general, people feel welcome and they feel warm and they feel encouraged, and they feel like they can say something there that nobody is gonna, take umbrage at. The keyboard warriors aren't gonna flame them for it, and you will see many people ask a question like, I'm sorry if this is a stupid question. I really wish people would eradicate that phraseology from their vocabulary. I hate that. There is no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know the answer, it's because nobody's told you yet. That's not making you stupid. That is not what stupidity means. Okay. This is your place to ask that question, to get that information, and then you are educated, right? And then you are, you're in a much better place than you were 5 minutes ago. Please ask the question. And, I encourage everybody watching this, please go to the Trailblazer community and join a group so that you can ask a question, whatever it might be. As an admin, the admin group has like 112,000 people in it, right? So there's 112,000 people who are willing to give you the answer to a question in a lovely response without making you feel bad about it. If somebody does make you feel bad about it, you can report them and have them kicked out. Easy.
I think so I completely agree, and I think that's again an interesting thing about sort of about those safe spaces. It's not just it's for different things that make you feel uncomfortable. It's not just one thing about it's not just gender, sexuality, or identity, or any of these other things. It's also experience level and kind of all of these many different facets. One of the things that I think I spoke about with Kieran recently, one of the podcasts, was one of the things I think's got a lot harder for people, especially more junior people, is when I first started working with with Salesforce, but when I first started working as a developer, I was in an office because it was that long ago where everyone had to go into an office and we all had a physical like desktop machine that you couldn't take home. Which was great because it meant that like no one could be like, well, you can finish that over the weekend. It's like, if the office isn't open, I'm not finishing it. But I was one of the things that I was always consider myself very lucky about was that I had really good people with me that I could sit there and I would always be like, okay, I've spent half an hour on this, and I'd just watch out for someone like going for a coffee or on their way back from the bathroom or something, and they'd be like, I'm not interrupting them in the middle of their work. I could be like, hey, Andy Fawcett, who was prime example of that earlier, I could just say, listen, Andy, can I grab half an hour with you later just to go through this problem? I'm going to work on something else, but this is it. And have someone sit there physically with you and go, I see what you've tried. This is what I've tried. This is what I think should work. This isn't working. Can you help me? And have someone smart and comfortable and nice like that sit down with you. And it was great to have a team of people like that. One of the things Kieran and I were discussing is that I think since the pandemic, that has really shifted. And it's interesting because I think that there's a two-parter to it. Number one is that it's obviously that for companies to hire more experienced people, if I work for myself, but if I was to go and work for a partner or a company and they said, Paul, you've got to be in the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week, I would say, well, this was a lovely conversation, but no, thank you. Because I, as much as I don't leave these four walls much, I do like it here. But I do think that there's also a flip side of that, though, which is that there is a certain level of incumbency upon those with more experience to remember what it was like and to try and go into the offices and see that if you're working in a team. Because it's like when you're on a road and you see a learner driver, and whenever it always irritates me whenever you say, whenever someone goes, "Oh, learner," it's like you were a learner driver.
You have to drive. You have to try it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. How did you get to the point where you could drive a car? You were a learner. Like
and this is exactly why I think the generation of today are really having a hard time. I mean, my my daughter doesn't want to do anything unless she's already convinced herself she's an expert at it. right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not how life works. You can't be a rocket scientist tomorrow because you decide to. You have to build up, and you have to be in group situations. You have to work on projects together, and you have to see how Shelley did it, and how Frank did it, and how Keith did it, and how
Always.
they've each approached the problem. And then you can sort of start honing your skills. I'm going to pick up one piece from each of those people and bring that back into how I do the next thing. And we have lost that, and we've created a whole generation of people who think that they have to already know everything, and that's really no good for anybody.
Yeah, I think it's so. I think like sort of Peter and I. Well, in fact, we were streaming this morning. Not this morning when this comes out. Time dilation has just thrown that out. But as we are recording now, this morning Peter and I did we do sort of a 2-hour coding session every fortnight where we go through and try and build something we're working on together, and it is the most humbling experience. Like the reason that Peter and I have
Yeah,
done it is
yeah,
because Peter and I both know that we know how to code and we have products out there, and we've been doing this for a while,
yeah,
but we also are fully aware of how often we spend time going, wait, what's that? Why is that not working? I don't
yeah,
like
yeah,
what the why is that red wiggly line there? Yeah, what? Oh, this
yeah,
stupid thing. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, and that's after a long enough period of time, you just know that there's a that part of like you've heard of like test driven development and sort of domain driven development, all these things.
yes.
I do like kind of error driven development where what I do is I get so far and it breaks, or I've done something
Yeah,
stupid, or
sure, yeah.
I've just lost it. It's idiot driven development. Just me going through and just thinking, oh, I'm an idiot. Oh wait, no, I've got this. I'm a genius. Oh wait, no, I'm an idiot. And it's
Code
one
is
or
very humbling. Yes.
it's one or the other, and then add into the mix that AI is then sat there being like, "Do you mean this?" And I go, "No, I don't mean that." And then sometimes
Yeah,
it's right, and sometimes I'm like, "Haha, I told you I didn't mean that." It's a so I completely I completely see that like for the younger generation, it's got to be very very hard coming in and
yeah, sure.
having things where you see people with expertise, but also just the rate of change of stuff means it's actually very hard. It's actually very hard to become very skilled at something when it's changed when the goalposts are moving on it so quickly.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I talked about earlier is how much I love that Salesforce is really agile. The way that specifically impacts my community is that we have 3 releases a year.
Mm.
3 releases a year on the platform. Like,
Oh
my
yeah.
God, like that is a huge amount of information to get your head around 3 times a year. Um, and that's again why I like the inspirational sessions, because I've met developers who come to one of the events, and we're standing having a chat, and they'll say, oh well, yeah, all I do is build, fill in the blank here, and
Yeah.
that's it. And that's all I'm allowed to do. And I said, yeah, but one day, right? One day you're going to be in that meeting, and somebody's going to say, well, what we really need here is a round door frame. And you're going to be able to say, why do you need a round door frame? Because I
Yep.
can build you that, but actually I learned this new way, or I saw this new way to build a rectangular shaped door frame, and you could get more stuff in it. Right. And then suddenly that conversation you are empowering and changing the future of what the company implements. And it's having that sort of accessibility and transparency.
Mhm.
Again, my favorite word, coming to an event or watching it on Salesforce Plus or watching a code live or coming to my personal delivery that I put on every month is the Ask Me Anything, right? And Ask Me
Mhm.
Anything is I have 2 to 3 product managers hosted by a developer advocate. They get 10 minutes. That's it, 10 minutes to give a briefing on whatever subject it is, right?
Mhm.
And then we open the doors live for questions, right? This past month, we had, I still can't get over it, we had 900 registrations for the Ask
Oh
Me
wow.
Anything, right? So that just shows you that this is where people like to go. They like to learn from the experts. They like to have the transparency of seeing what that product manager is talking about, is able to develop, is able to show, is able to build. And also how great it is for the product managers, the technology makers, that they can have all of this live feedback from hundreds of people scattered all over the globe, right? And that's really important. They're not hundreds of people in a room in California. There are hundreds of people scattered all across the globe, right? To say, I would like to know why you chose to do this instead of this, or where are you going with that? And if I can get those product managers to also give a roadmap peek, oh, I've nailed it that month, right? Nailed it. And that's what really helps our community grow and shape themselves and pick new areas of development and skill set to go and investigate. And I always, for all of the sessions that I try and oversee, whether it's for a live in-person event or whether it's for Ask Me Anything, I say, give those people some resources. Right? Because you want to inspire them with what you just told them, and you want them to walk out of that room ready to get hands-on to try it themselves. That is the best way that people learn. Now, if people go to that session and then 3 of them gather at the water cooler the next day or at the airport on their way home or whatever it is and say, hey, do you want to all get together and try this out? That's even better. Yes, please. Like, share what you've learned and try it out together. I think you can really only get better if you do have a play, but if you see somebody else doing it, it really inspires you to do it their way and then to try it your way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the number of times that I've gone to events or seen people post blogs or things that have made me go, oh, I should try something like that. It is a real key driver. And one of the things that kind of I want to just touch on a little bit is obviously you think you run the you think many things, Christie, but you run the one of the things that you mentioned you're kind of running is and leading is things like the developer track for like TDX and for the World Tours and the Dreamforce and things like that. So, and I've always enjoyed going to these events and both speaking at them and seeing them because there is these things. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you look for? And I know that the call for papers has gone live as we're recording it this week for Dreamforce, but it'll still be open I think when this is published. But what do you look for when you're reviewing sessions, and kind of what to you makes a really good session, and how do you keep that kind of quality up? Because that's really what you're looking for, isn't it? Is a good diverse range of high quality sessions.
Yes, that is the dream state, right? A good quality presentations. It's funny because when you read a CFP, so I'm just a voter, right? Of all the CFPs, the way it works, this is me pulling behind the curtain. Everybody submits their session. So Paul Battisson submits a session, it goes into the database, and then I pull it out, and then I have and then I have a team of expert voters. I am not an expert voter, right? Because I'm not one of our technologists. But I have a team of experts, subject matter experts that are product people, that are developer advocates, that are admin evangelists, all different kinds of people, and they all go in and they vote, right? And they'll see, here's a session from Paul, and it's talking about this, and 7 to 12 of them will say it's great, or give it some kind of score, and you bubble up to the top. That's how it works. Okay, it's a democratic process, which I love. So it's not up to Christie; it's up to the voters. So
sorry to interrupt. I also correct it's a blind process, so that you don't see
we don't have any idea.
Yeah. So just wanted to clarify that because I have had numerous people. I was helping on the London schooling ones this year, reviewing some of them for the team and others, and I've lots of people have said to me, well, of course you'll get in because you know that. It's like, no, nobody knows it. Unless I write in there enough information to give away who I am. It doesn't happen. Yeah,
that's exactly right. We do blind voting as far as the submitter goes. We don't have the country of the person, the geo. Every piece of personal data that you put in there is stripped out for voting, 100% guaranteed. So once we have, it's funny because again, I can cast my vote and I'll look at the title and the abstract, right? But again, I'm not an expert. I cannot sit down and write Lightning Web Components. That is not my skill set. I can write HTML, but nobody does that anymore.
Again, if you've watched me and Peter do our live streams, apparently we can't write Lightning Web Components either, from what we've seen.
So, we have, I'll look at what I tend to do is there's a handy dandy notes column on the end of the voting table for each row. And many times our voters will put a little note in there. I think this is a duplicate of this session, and I like that one better because of X. Or I think this would be such a great piece of information because nobody's really talked about that yet. Or I love this because, right? It sort of sets my scene. So it helps me kind of make a decision. So I'm able to cast votes as well. But sometimes I don't put a vote on something if I don't feel comfortable in understanding what it's talking about. So the abstract has to do a lot of work, and it's only 200 characters, right? It's only 200. So that piece of data is important, but the most important piece of data for me is the field that says, tell us why this session should be presented. Honestly, how neglected this particular area is. People will put on there, because the second part of it is, and tell us if you've delivered it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So people will usually fill it in. So like Todd, if Todd was going to do it, Todd would say, oh yes, I've delivered the session at London's Calling, or I delivered the session at the developer group in London and it went really well. That tells me nothing, right? Don't just focus on that part of the question. Focus on why it should be delivered. Well, Christie, or voting panel, it should be delivered because this is a really important thing for, I work with hundreds of clients. I work with 10 clients. I work with one company. Everybody's talking about this. This is making a huge difference to how we operate on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so that particular field is really important for me. But it's really the dry run where things get unbelievably powerful, right? Because that's when I can see how a session is being delivered. And that's my sweet spot, right? So I can see that, this particular speaker had a good abstract. Everybody loved it. It got high votes. We've chosen that speaker. And then the dry run comes. And this is why I say dry runs are mandatory for my speakers. Like they all, I'm sure, hate me for it, but dry runs are really important because what needs to happen and what should happen is that everybody remembers stories. People don't remember facts very well, but they remember stories, right? So what I want is for people to leave that room and go stand beside each other in the lunch queue and talk about what they just saw. Now, if I tell you that my car broke down and I needed a new carburetor, that's a mildly interesting story, right? Mildly, right? But if I tell you that my car broke down on the side of the road because the carburetor broke and a bear attacked me while I was waiting for the tow truck, you're really going to remember that story, right?
Yeah.
That's what I impress upon all my speakers. I want the story. What was the challenge? Why did you pick the solution that you did? How did you implement that solution? And what were the results? It's 4 basic tenets of storytelling, and it makes such a massive difference. I see a lot of people come to their dry run where they just immediately start coding. Now, I take a really good balance with that because developers love to see code. That's okay. I'm totally cool with that. But make sure that you're helping them understand that it's this plus this plus this plus this. So it doesn't have to be a story in that respect. It could just be code 1, code 2, code 3 equals 4, right? That's okay. But if it's, I'm working with this customer and they had this particular problem and I solved it this way, and that's what we got out of it, that is a much better thing. And it's something that everybody in that room, no matter their level of expertise, no matter their persona identification, no matter their experience level, can walk out and go, I totally got that story.
I completely agree. And like the worst, and I don't like to use the term worst here because I know how much effort everyone puts into who speaks at events, but the talks I've been to that have been the least enjoyable have always been ones where someone's just stood there and read their slide. I'm just like, well, this is, they just read their slide. They don't really have a story. It's like, here's a bunch of bullet points and a bunch of facts. And you say, because the thing is, even at that instance, if they're just starting to try and tell a story, you feel like you're zoning out because you're reading their bullet points.
Yeah.
One of the things I read years ago that I've always applied to to any of the presentations I'm doing is I try and avoid words, because. So I can't remember where I read it or who I saw, but someone was saying that if you watch most TED Talks,
Hmm.
they don't have slides with words on, or they might have a word on, like the word think or something,
Yeah.
something abstract. And they're saying the reason being is that what some of the speakers have been taught to do is to try and build a memory palace, sort of. So when you're going through, so when you're looking at the way and the way I try and personally to build kind of presentations now is, if I'm going through it, I want that story, but the pictures are effectively nudges along the journey on the memory
Yes.
palace
Yes.
to make me
Yes.
kind of go, oh, this is where, because then it means that if someone does ask a question, the fire alarm goes off,
Yeah.
there's a power cut or whatever, like I'm not
Hmm.
lost on my story because I know, oh, wait, we were here, and kind of you
Yeah.
can make them lead into one another. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that the storytelling thing is such a big aspect. It is something that I think a lot of people forget
Yeah.
when they are trying to put together a technical presentation. They're too busy trying to be like, here's a bunch of numbers, rather
Yeah.
than, okay, but like, here's the journey I went on, and here's why it
Mm.
matters.
And again, there's nothing wrong with just standing up and showing the code, right?
No,
That's perfectly fine. But just make sure that you're presenting it in a way so that people build their knowledge and their expertise along with you, right? Like if you were a plumber, you would never walk up and say, okay, we're going to start at the top of the house and work our way down, right?
no,
In a new build, we're going to actually lay the pipe work into the foundation and build up. And that's what needs to happen for people to walk out thinking that was a fulfilling session. I am fulfilled because I sat through that and listened to that 20 minutes of really great stuff. I'm not saying that everybody is going to do that. I mean, there are some people who are fairly resistant to it, or, no matter how much I sort of gently encourage and coach, they can't really get their heads around it. But that's okay. That's fine. Um, any little any little win is a big win, right? Because if it means that one person in the audience got it more than they were going to,
yeah,
massive win. And I think it's so important because a lot of, and I'm just going to talk about my developer, you know knowledge here,
mhm,
my knowledge of developers, having been amongst them as as a surveyor in the wild for years and years and years. They really learn by seeing,
mhm,
and they really like, um they don't want you to plop the answer in front of them. They want to go on a journey with you. Like, and nothing will inspire an audience of developers more than them getting to slide 6 with you and being like, that guy made the wrong choice, I would have
yeah,
done this, right? And you can see everybody in the room's face change when that happens. They are so engaged, they are so on it, they are so interested in seeing how on earth it worked out for him, because they all knew it was going to go this other way. And that's again how you learn, right? And what was it? Albert, sorry, the light bulb, Edison said, I didn't learn how to fail. I learned 9,000 ways to not make a light bulb, right?
yeah,
and
exactly.
and that's, how can you see how not to make a light bulb unless you see somebody doing that? I would love nothing more than for every single one of my presenters to stand on stage and and have a slide on how I failed, right? Like that would be such a win for everybody in the audience. But it's it's a little bit harder to convince people to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the interesting things as well with some of the sessions, as well, that like I've the ones that I've always enjoyed going to or had the best feedback on were the ones where it was like, it's either something, I've done ones on like building VR systems in sales, things that really
Mm.
have zero practical application. Let's be clear. Or like I did one back in 2014 about building a machine learning system in
Oh
Apex,
wow. Mm.
and yeah, I should have called it Agent Force and took the brand then, and then just like, I'd be a millionaire now. But the point being is that, but those ones where it's those kind of sessions where there's something really out there and wacky and wild, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
look, this is the thing we're trying to do. We're not trying to do this because we have any practical use for this whatsoever. The reason we're trying to do this is because there's a bunch of interesting problems on the way.
Yes.
Let's go and
Yes.
solve them. And if we get to the end and like we've got a VR headset that's showing fireworks, well, wonderful, that's great.
Yeah.
But let's talk about all the cool bits that we've kind of had to pick together and go, oh wait, this doesn't work, and all those problems. I think there's a real kind of, as you say, that journey and that story is kind of where you're in, and sharing those ups and downs on the way really helps.
Yeah. And I love being able to kind of enlighten people in that
Mm.
way, because you talked earlier about how important it is for the content sort of pitch, right?
Mhm.
The tone and the pitch are really important to match up with the audience's expectations. So if you submit that you're going to deliver a beginner's session, and then I'm sitting with you on the dry run and I'm a beginner and I can't follow it, I want to help you, look, that's a little bit too advanced. Can we tone this down? Can you bring this up? Can you, and people need that guidance sometimes, because they've forgotten what it's like to be a beginner, or they're really super beginners themselves, and we know that this is a more intermediate session, whatever it might be. Like, I want to make sure that they are massively successful. I want people to walk out like they've just attended a Foo Fighters concert. That was awesome.
It's,
Of every single one of the sessions.
well, one of the things I'm going to say here as well is that I think for anyone listening who is looking to present at Dreamforce or London School or any of these events, my biggest piece of advice is, particularly if you're doing something different or that you've not done before, is go and do it to a community group first. So,
100%.
because you will find. So I did one at Irish Dreaming, which was a murder mystery to learn SOQL for admins, and it was like that. I was dressed up with a hat and a pipe and all sorts of stuff, and it was an idea for a game I had that I wanted to kind of have this game that we played as a group. And because it was so, I've done enough slide presentations I can fly through. Like, slides don't worry me, I'm okay with those, and I've done enough coding presentations. But this, I'm like, okay, there's some acting, I've got to check the pacing, I've got to check that. I have a lot more respect now for people who write murder mysteries, because I'm like, how do you not give the game away, but also give enough of the game away? Because you want, again, when I got to the end, I wanted people to be like, oh, we do know who it is. Not because if everyone's sat there being like,
Yes.
I have no idea, then I'm like, well, I've got to have some big reveal that no one's going to notice. Oh yeah, did I not mention the candlestick? It's not going to help. So I went to the Cambridge admin group and had the Norfolk group come over as well, and it was a wonderful session where we had sort of 7 or 8 people there. They were all admins, all the perfect target audience, and I just stood up at the front and said, "Listen, you are all guinea pigs for this. This might not work at all, but we need to I need to find out, because I'm meant to be presenting this in a month, and so I need you guys to tell me what's wrong." And we had a great time. I learned a lot about the session and what I needed to change, and then the session that happened in Ireland worked really, really well. But the audience, that like the team that were at that group, were really wanting to help me. Like, people want to help you and want to make it better. And they all got a big round of applause at the end of the session in Ireland, because I was like, these people have really have helped make it. And so, if you are looking to present at Dreamforce, at TDX, at anything, and you are either doing something a little bit outside your comfort zone or something you haven't done before, my advice 100% is find your most local admin or user group or developer group. If you can't find one locally, a lot of them are happy for you to present online, but just find a way of doing it to just see how it works, and how the timing goes, as well as anything else. It's
100%.
really important. Like, all of those groups are always looking for content, and they're always very, very friendly.
Yeah. And I think as well, people are, intimidated to stand. It's very difficult to stand in front of a group of people and deliver a session. It's very hard. I have nothing but respect for anybody willing to do it. So the great thing is you could try it out in a smaller group, but if you're still worried, try it on a smaller group, right? Like, ask your kids to sit down and deliver it to your kids, or, get your neighbors around on a Friday night, and, or like your parents, right? Nobody's going to tell you the truth like your mom.
One of the ones I used to do is, a lot of the ones I do now, I'll have my wife check through. I mean, she used to check through them before, but I'll do them to, because she isn't a beginner, but she's also very good at it. But she's also not a developer. So if I'm talking about some developer stuff, she can kind of help. She can help on that front. But colleagues as well, like,
Absolutely.
whenever I've worked somewhere and a colleague has said they've got something going for Dreamforce or another event, I'm like, great. If you want to do a dry run to someone who's going to sit there and just listen, we'd always be able to find 4 or 5 colleagues that would sit there over lunch, listen, and give you friendly but fair feedback. And again, you don't want to choose, if it's someone that you don't get on particularly well with, be careful.
Right.
But but I also think, and this is something Peter Chittum was talking to me about the other week, and like really has reiterated to me, and I think it's a really important point. Is I think it's also upon you to be open about what feedback you expect and want. And when I say that, I don't mean sitting there and saying, yeah, if I was doing a presentation to you for feedback, I wouldn't sit there and say, "Hey, Christie, I expect at the end of this you to say that was bloody wonderful, that I'm the best speaker ever." But what I mean is, if I sat there and say, "Hey, Christie, look, I would like feedback on these things and
Yeah,
not
yeah,
on these
yeah.
other things. I would like the feedback to help me focus on getting these things better, um,
Mhm.
and do it that way, because then you've got an alignment together on that
Yeah,
feedback rather than because often otherwise, you know, um, if you're like you and I know each other well, and hopefully it's probably come across this podcast, get on well and are friendly. So I wouldn't worry about showing you or Peter or a bunch of other people something and getting feedback, because I know it's coming from a place of
yeah,
love and care.
yeah,
But if you're doing it to someone who you don't have that with, I think level setting that up front is a really good way of making sure that both you and that person can focus on
yeah.
really helping you.
I love that. And I think, you know, I've had people show up for dry runs and their slides aren't ready. And I
Yeah,
say, okay, first of all, you're not squirreling out of your dry run. You still have to do your dry run. However, because your slides aren't ready, that's totally fine, right? And
yeah,
some people are literally like have been too afraid to try and build their slides because they're just so freaked out. And so this is my 30-minute opportunity to make you feel totally comfortable and to help you break down those barriers, right? So I'll say, it's fine if your slides aren't ready. Walk me through what you're going to talk about.
yeah.
Why, what would you say at this point? What would you say at this point? And that's good enough, right? Because sometimes just talking it through takes a lot of the fear away from the creation and from the delivery. And if you can separate those things, it can really help spur that inspiration inside your brain to get you back to that original bravery that you had to submit the session in the first place to the CFP. And we always say, in our feedback and our comments and our, the information that we send back to you, if we don't select your session, please go and present it. the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
community's desperate for your content, and we're sorry we didn't pick it. I only have so many choices. I'm limited. I have thousands of sessions to choose from. I'm spoiled for choice. Give that choice to other groups, to community conferences, and it's a great way to build up your confidence and to build up your storytelling skills, and to build up your presentation skills. And then suddenly you're presenting a much better abstract. You're presenting a really engaging title for your presentation. You're giving me that really chunky, delicious why this session should be presented information, and your score is going to be higher. So confidence is key. And the way that you can get that is from this community is passionate, it's thriving, and they are really they really care about your success, so use them.
Oh yeah, and like I also think that one of the things that a lot of people forget, just building on what you're saying there about going to, if you get told no, I think it's really important as well to remember that it's not a no to you in your session; it's a no to that specific session or that event.
Right.
And that's a really important thing to remember, that like I have done there's one session I did a few years back, at one of the London developer groups, and
Hmm.
it was, it would have been awful for like for a conference at all, because it was really kind of vibes based, shall we say. Like I
Right.
had an idea where I
Just
was
going to give it
going.
give something a try.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was me. There was a laptop. There was a rough thread, and I was like, "Look, we're going to figure this out together," because I was comfortable doing that, and there was something we were working on and all trying out, and it worked. It worked for that group because everyone was sat there at 6:30 with a couple of beers and some pizza, and it was good, and everyone was fine, and there was the right sort of area for it. That if I'd have rocked up to a Dreamforce room and said like, "Great, we're going to vibe through this for half an hour," like
Yeah.
you don't want that, because Dreamforce session, I'd have got the 9 o'clock session as well on like the night
On
after the
day
Foo
two.
Fighters.
On day two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I'd have got the worst session for it. Everyone had been hungover or something, and I'd have been like, yeah. So, but
Yeah.
that's it. Like when you're submitting these sessions, don't take it as a no on you.
That's
It's
right.
that session isn't right for that conference at this
Right.
time. Go away and work on it. Go away and do it in different events. And there's loads of things. So
Yeah.
I'm aware that we've covered a lot of stuff today here, and I'm aware that it is getting into your Friday evening, so I don't want to keep you too long. But the last thing I kind of want to just talk about, Christie, is kind of what you're working on now and what's
Mhm.
kind of exciting you for the future. Because we've covered a lot of things around the different roles you've had, and one of the things that I think's really come through is your passion for working with people and seeing their excitement and passion for technology and helping that kind of foster and bloom up. So, what is it you're working on and focused on at the moment, and what's kind of exciting you over the next year? I mean, we're in the start of May now, so it'll be
Yeah.
end of May by the time this comes out. What's exciting you into June and beyond, shall we say?
Um, all of these massive bookmark events in the calendar. I love my job of looking over, being responsible for, the technical tracks at Dreamforce and Trailblazer DX San Francisco, and how that's actually changed now. It's modified, it's morphed to being also responsible for the technical track at TDX London. How exciting is that? I mean, to have it come to my own home, home backyard, and to have, these incredible, like, I love reading what people submit. I'm
Yeah,
so interested in technology. I joked to Peter Chittum once that I could probably host a panel on slugs in your garden, because I'm just so interested in
yeah.
everything. But if it's technology driven, oh my gosh, that's even more exciting for me. So I am getting much better um, at my job, because again, continuous learning. I'm getting much better at my job of being able to um, give great feedback to people, of being able to support them, of being able to coach them, of being able to get them into the right position. Every time I do it, I walk out of a dry run or a session or something, and I'm so inspired by what I've just seen. And I love that Salesforce changes all the time, all the
Mhm.
different releases that we have coming out. I love to see use cases, what people are building. I just it's like I get so much into my personal cup by seeing what other people are doing. They inspire me. And so, for right now, I am really, really excited about Dreamforce, really, really excited about TDX London, and really, really excited about TDX next year, because it'll probably be 100% different than it is this year,
Yeah.
because that's how Salesforce is. And thank God for that. So
Yeah. Super. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to. I'll definitely be there for the TDX London in a couple of months, and then
great.
it's going to be exciting to see. So to wrap up,
Mhm.
then the last thing. So first of all, thank you so much again for all of your time
Thank
today. It's
you.
been lovely, and always lovely to catch up and have a good chat with you as well.
Same.
So what I ask people just to wrap up is if they've got a tip or a piece of advice that they give to those listening at the moment for them
Mhm.
to take away and and start to think about what they could use in their daily life. And I try and tell people to not have too technical a tip. I don't want someone coming on here and being
Yeah.
like, "Oh, what you should do is just refactor all of your blah blah." No one needs that.
The word
But,
refactor should be struck from from common vernacular.
so something that you think that people
Mhm.
should take away as a bit of advice, a tip, something that's helped you, they can take away and action in their life. Because we've covered off a lot today in terms of
Yeah.
your background, the different roles you've had, how you moved into how you were obviously more on the literature side and then moved into technology, your experience in technical writing. We talked obviously about the changing nature of that content and how that moved forward, how COVID's hit that, the difference in
Yeah.
communities and groups. We've talked about kind of the richness and diversity of groups and how that's been such a positive in the Salesforce space and how that's changed over time as well for what's needed in promoting that and things. We've talked about leading events. So we've talked about a load of stuff. So what would be your piece
Yeah.
of advice that people can take home?
Help somebody out,
Help
right?
somebody out.
Help somebody out, because you can really change the trajectory of a person's life, career, professional development, personal development, by just supporting that individual. If somebody's they know something and you think that other people could really benefit if by knowing that, why don't you see if you can help that person get brave enough to present it at a group, walk them through a dry run, give them some feedback, teach somebody how to do something, give somebody something so that they can progress and grow. That is what I really love to do. I love to give people things that help them, cultivate their gardens. And I, if that's the one piece of advice I could give. My daughter is kind of, she was really despondent for a while over the shape of the world. And I said, Mr. Rogers famously said, when things are going bad, look for the helpers, right? And if you feel like you aren't making a difference, you could make a difference in a very tiny way, in your own special way. So make that difference. Offer to help somebody, offer to support them, offer to get them on the road of where they want to go. And it gives back to you a million times more than it will give back to that person. So it's you can take that into every aspect of your life, not just in Salesforce.
That is a fantastic piece of advice, and yeah, definitely one that I think people can take to all areas of their life, you say. So, well, once again, Christie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful having you here and having a good chat with you. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Please remember to, give the give the episode a like, leave a review. The more you like and share things, the more people can hear, and the more people we can get on to have such wonderful conversations. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to everyone on the next episode. And thanks again, Christie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.